Hiya, have you ever wondered if you could paint moving water on a river? Well, that's what we're going to do today. Hi, I'm Jackie Smurden, this is Dunnock Studio and I'm all about art with a heart, and I live in the heart of Norfolk, UK. So let's get started. So here's my reference photo, which I have printed in black and white. That helps me see the values, how light or dark something is. And I've done a quick sketch underneath here with just a normal, I think it's a 3B pencil. So there you go, just a standard 3B pencil. It's quite soft, so it's easy to rub off again. Tried not to press too hard, but I need to press a little bit harder so you can see what I've drawn there. Doesn't matter, it's not accurate. I have slightly moved the bridge down the page because on this photo it's right in the centre of the horizon from there to there. So I've just dropped it down a little bit so it's a little bit more balanced. It's not that far down, but it's enough for me, anyway, for me to be happy that I've dropped it down. But on the reference you can see I've got some white foamy water here and some little bits of froth and all sorts of things. So I'm going to use masking fluid in this instance just to suggest that, so we can put our colours on top and then later take the masking fluid off. So I'm using my standard, this is an SAA one, but there's many suppliers. A blue mask, which just means you can see where you put it. But you don't have to have blue, you can have white, and if you're using this yourself you'll be able to see where you're going. I'm just trying to make sure you can see where I've gone. So it's a little bit gunky in there, but it's still good to go, still fluid in there. Don't ever shake these. The more air you put into them, the more likely they are to go off quicker. And just a quick note, this is latex, so if you have a latex allergy, make sure you look up a latex free version. So for my first little bit of white, which is this main area here, I'm going to use an old brush. As soon as I put this brush in here, I'm basically consigning this brush to be a masking fluid mess for the rest of its poor life. So don't ever use a brush that you value, because you will not be able to use it for anything else, however well you look after it. So I'm just going to splatter on here with some rough marks. I'm just sort of letting my hand just dance around a little bit, trying to keep the brush moving, maybe try different angles. There's a bit of splashing in there. Oh, it's drying quick today. It's very warm in here today. That's a little bit too much. Just splattering it down. So this is the frothy, whitest part of the water. Just bringing it down, spacing it out as I go. You can see I keep turning the brush as I go. There's some froth down here. Oops, way too much now. When something like that happens, don't worry, because later on when it's dry you can just peel it off. If it's just gone a little bit too big a blob, it's not going to look good. So I'm going to just put in some marks here, and let's see what happens if I just drag it sideways, as if there's some froth going off over there. Yeah, and maybe we've got some light on the photo here, which is coming from the sky down there. So I might just put some of a suggestion there. Now this is already dry. It's that brush has had it now. Just gonna lob in on some masking fluid there. Look at that, look how dry that's gone. Wow. Honestly, that is dry. Okay, another way you can use masking fluid, I'm just going to drop this one into some old an old tub of, not with my pipette in, an old yoghurt tub, just to stop it drying out completely, but I think that one's already gone due to the heat in here. So I'm now going to grab a toothbrush, and this is a well-used painting toothbrush, and I'm going to just try and have some finer bits of water sparkles, shall we say, maybe around that area there, and maybe some in the foreground here. I'm not going to go too mad. Now I'm going to use my piece of paper, which is quite handily just about the right size, pop that there so I don't splatter my sky. Just dip in the toothbrush so it's got a covering. If you're not sure how this is going to go, practice somewhere else, but it doesn't matter if the blobs are too big, you just take them off. So let's have a think. Let's have some splatters over, oop, big blob there which will get taken off. Let's have some splatters over this side. That's worked quite nicely there, and a few in the corner here, and maybe around this area. Okay, now I could overdo this, and you're probably thinking you've already overdone it, Jackie. That's fine. Sometimes it's just fun to overdo things, so I'll tell you what, let's use what's left and have a little bit of sparkle up in the trees, maybe just in a couple of spots with what's left. And again, this toothbrush is now full of masking fluid, so I've popped it straight in the water, and then I'll have to clean that have to clean it up later with some washing up liquid. So I'm now going to let that dry, but before I do that, I'm going to put my lid back on so that I don't end up with that drying out completely just yet. So most of this masking fluid is dry. There's a couple of bits down here which is very thick and they haven't dried, so I'm using an old bit of rag just to lift them off. It's actually drier than it looks. Oh, I take it back, it's dry. That one is. There was one over here that wasn't, and that popped off straight away. So I'm just going to run my finger over. If it feels tacky but nothing comes off on my fingers, then it is dry. So we're now going to do some big washes over this. Now, as you will have seen from the video at the beginning, it was a late winter scene, so I don't want any bright spring-like colours in this one. That will be for another painting. So I think to start off with, I'm going to give it a warm winter feel with some raw sienna, and a cool winter feel with a cool blue. I might use some Prussian blue that I've using up an old tube of dried up paint, so it's got texture in it, but that might work quite well in this picture. So I'll just mix up my paints. Okay, I'm going to paint this wet on dry, and I'm using a 50% cotton paper Fabriano, which I've bought in a large sheet and cut down. So I'm going to go in, and remembering my reference photo is in black and white, which enables me to make my own colours, so I don't have to worry about the colours on the picture. So for the first wash, I'm going to just run this through pretty much over the tree areas, right through the bridge, as you would imagine. Raw sienna is such a good colour for buildings, all that sort of thing. Can run it down through all the tree area. Now it's already started to dry, so I shall pop the rest of this on and then get my spray. So by spraying, I'm helping that to stay damp. Now, spraying your picture, you might not need to do this if it was a cool, damp day. Sometimes when you're painting, you realise very early on that perhaps you should have dampened your paper first, but you don't have to, each to your own, you just do what you want to do. I've got some tree areas here, soften those edges in there. Now I want some blue in here. Now, as you would imagine, blue and yellow will possibly make a green. So I've got to see what happens. It's a cool blue, pulling it through that sky area there. Not worried if it turns green, but you've just got to be aware that could happen. So you're not completely surprised when it does, thinking, hang on a minute, I didn't ask for a green sky. There we go. And of course any sky colour will reflect in the water. So let's have that first wash of watercolour down there. Maybe some there. There we go. And then I'm going to wash my brush out and just pick up a slightly turquoise blue, mix that in with some of the original, not too much, and then dull it down with a tiny bit of that yellow. Let's see what that does. Now I haven't left any white areas with my brush there, which perhaps is a mistake. Could have perhaps left some there, but that's fine. Just let that go. So you've got a hard edge there. I wonder if some of you have noticed that I'm using a much bigger brush than normal. If you want to loosen up your paintings, my top tip for you is get a bigger brush. You can't fiddle with a large brush. You can just splosh and splash. So I've got a nice wash of blue through there. So this is the paint that was dried out completely. So there's a few little bits of paint on the page there. There's one there as well. But actually I don't mind that. I think it's fine. I'd rather use up the paint than throw it away. I am thinking that I need to break up some of this. So let's just roll a cloth across here. This is quite nice for clouds as well. It's just breaking up this. I've got a mass of blue here that I perhaps didn't want quite so thick and unyielding. This is still damp, so I can now come in. I'm using sepia here, and I could just see what happens if I just drop in some trees. That's still damp, so they're going to spread out, but I don't mind that. Just drawing some rough tree shapes, and some that go right off the page. That go, and then dropping in some dark areas up here, using this side of the brush just to suggest something happening up here. You can see my paper's buckled a little bit, but I just really don't worry about these things because it'll flatten out afterwards. So that spread out quite a lot more than I intended, but that's fine. This is our initial wash. Got some sparkles there where the masking fluid was. So if you don't want some of the marks that you've picked up when things have gone somewhere else, is just lift it back off again. So I'm going to lift out that bridge area so that I don't lose my nice light bridge. There we go. Now we need to put some darks in under here, but I'm going to wait until the rest of it's dry, but I might just suggest the background areas that are going on behind here, including that tree which goes off up there, and we've got a bit of sign here and some wood things and all sorts of things. Just going to dot in a few lines there, and then it's a bit of a scrubby bit here. Let's pop that in. I don't normally use sepia. I'm finding it's quite opaque actually, and just a colour that I've had sat in my palette since the workshop that I've never really used. So I thought let's give it a go. It's a warm brown, but it seems to fit, I don't know, it just feels like it fits the time of year quite well for this particular painting. Okay, going to let that dry. Do you find yourself wishing you didn't bother to paint because you've reached the ugly stage? Well, welcome to my ugly stage. Doesn't look much, does it? However, here's my reference photo, which I try not to stick to rigidly. However, it helps. I now need to add my darks. You can see there are darks under that bridge, along the edge of the bottom of the bridge, certainly behind where the main part of water is coming through. So what I've done is I've added indigo to the sepia, and I've got a light drawing under here. So I'm just going to now see with a fairly big brush, trying not to go too small, to add those darks in, and try not to follow perfectly straight lines that I've got under here, because I know, having been to this village bridge, that it is not perfectly straight, and neither is the water bubbling underneath it. So let's put in some of these lines, but not try and make them perfectly straight. There we go. And that's just going to start to give us a little bit more depth. There's a tiny part that is just under the arch there. You can do a lot with a round brush. This hasn't even got a particularly good point to it, but it's still good enough for me to be able to just get in there and drop down some lines. If I get lost, I just revert back to my reference photo just to have a look what I'm actually trying to paint here. There is the other edge, so the perspective lines have started off going that way, now they're going that way. We won't get into perspective today, but if you can get it somewhere near close, you'll be doing well, but also you'll get more, your paintings will shine a bit more because they are well drawn. There's nothing worse than a badly drawn picture when you're trying to do something that is very much, it should look like the perspective is right and it doesn't. Then you definitely get into problems because your brain doesn't see it properly, it just doesn't know what to make of it. So that's a little bit dark there, but let's go with it. I've just added a little bit of sepia back in just to make this end part of here a little bit warmer, whereas over here they're a bit cooler. They're also, you can see, puddling up a little bit. So in order to stop those terrible back runs that everybody really worries about, just take it away. Thirsty brush, just make sure your brush is squeezed out and just pop it there, and it will take away the excess paint. So you might get these puddles where the paper is buckling slightly, so just to remove that, just use your thirsty brush. So we've now got some darks, which is already beginning to pull your eye in. Don't want to go too mad on the details on this picture. So what would I do next? I'll go back to my bigger brush, I think. Let's try it anyway. And pick up some more sepia, but with a little bit of indigo into it. And then I'm just going to run up, because this tree here could potentially have been lots of ivy on it, hence all these blurry bits going off. Trying to paint negatively across the top of the bridge there. Take that one off, like so. Just put a little bit more depth to him. Slightly smaller brush. Pick up some more sepia. Spare bit of paper, and then try and do some dry brushing just to suggest a little bit of ivy, etc., coming off the side there, which is on my reference. Ivy grows up the trees, and you see it more in the winter. Just dragging my brush sideways like that. And to make that tree look a bit more realistic, then I move on to a rigger brush and just bring out some branches any old how. This isn't a perfect tree, we're not doing tree painting, we're doing a river scene. So you could have one coming up straight alongside there. Sort of suggests that the branches go off somewhere, they're going towards something, like maybe they're going towards this canopy shapes here. There we go, there's one. So I'm going to continue to put in some trees here. If you do drop one in and you think, ooh, that's a little bit dark, don't forget, good old piece of towel, very expensive studio towel this, just lift out. Pop yourself along that line, lift them back off, vary your towel, keep moving it round, add some little wiggles in just to get a bit of variety. Once this dries we can add a bit more on if we want. That looks okay. So I'm going to carry on, do all the trees in the same way. It's always a good idea to have trees touching, because in nature they really wouldn't be standing out there on their own, would they? So all I'm using here is sepia and indigo. It's nice to do spattering if you like as you go. Spattering adds even more texture up there where that ivy is. There you go. Going to slightly smaller brush, picking up a little bit more indigo and a bit less sepia. I'll make a slightly bluier colour, and then I can pop in a tree that appears to be thinner and maybe further away. If it's too harsh, easy, give it a little spray. Okay, and then doing your rigger, the spray will also make that spatter off. You just be careful not to put too much on, because your spray can go a little bit wild. So that one's suggesting that tree's a bit further back because it's bluer. So I'll revert back to the warmer sepia now and do this tree. I quite enjoy trees. Wintertime you can really see them, can't you? As soon as you hit spring, which is racing ahead here in the UK, everything disappears in the canopy, and that's, don't get me wrong, that's lovely, but it's really, really hard to see what's going on with a tree when it's got its full canopy. So painting trees in winter form is really quite nice. See if I can just a bit dry brush. So you could do all sorts of things with this. You could have ivy, you know, you could paint it carefully, you could have some greens in there if you wanted to, as long as they were cool greens for this particular picture. This tree's just now grown itself some foliage, and that's fine. It's done its own thing, it's taken itself off on its own tangent. Just let that brush do some wiggle marks. There's a bit of sky here, so it's quite nice to have the branches overlapping that. I am not following my reference at the moment, because if I did I'd never manage to achieve anything, because I'd be hung up on the detail on the tree and it doesn't look right, etc, etc. So I'm just taking my brush for a walk, and that's a good way to do it. There you go. I'll leave this area clear because that's where my sky is, just having a few bits that are folding over in front of it. I've got a tree here that I popped in, so I'm going to do the sepia coloured tree. Can you see how these ones earlier that looked really ugly and huge have just gone back into the background now because they're quite pale? So we're just layering up some slightly thicker paint whilst making sure we can still see underneath, so all that detail we put on earlier isn't wasted. I'm not a tree expert. I think these are poplar trees growing down near the river, and I'm sure there's some others in there as well, but if you know which trees there are in this village in Norfolk, the village is called Lyng, L-Y-N-G, has this lovely river and a bridge that you can admire, as I did. Rivers are quite daunting if you don't know what to do and paint, but you know what, it's just a bit of stuff. Everything's stuff in paintings. Just have a go. What's the worst that can happen? Go on, what is the worst that can happen? Nothing. You just have a bit of fun with some paint, that's all you're doing. So I'm now just taking that shape over here. Shapes up there. So this is dry brushing using the side of my brush just to drag the paint across. As I said before, this is not an accurate tree painting by any means. Those people who are watching this who like painting trees are probably holding their heads. Oh my goodness, that's dreadful. We're just capturing a little moment on a river in Norfolk with a stream bubbling under the bridge, and that's it. Follow that branch there. Sometimes your rigger brush makes some amazing branches just by letting it dance about. That if you'd have tried to plan it, you'd never make it. It'd never happen. So, oh, don't let me forget my splatter. Hopefully you're splattering too. You get a bit braver with splattering. You don't worry if you accidentally put it elsewhere, which I have. Doesn't really matter, does it? I don't think that will come off because it's dried. That's fine. So yes, splattering can be used whichever brush you like. Splattering can really add a bit of character to your paintings, and it's so easy to do. So I'm just going to put a bit more in here. I know the wall carries on along here, but I'm not featuring it, so just a soft edge there to suggest the bridge carries on. But over here the bridge does stop, and we've got some foliage and all sorts of things. As I said before, I'm not going to use green, apart from what I've mixed with the blues and the yellows. So here I've got some trees that are over on this side. So rather than paint the trees, I'm just going to paint the negative shapes between them, if you get what I mean. There's a post here, so I'm going to come down there as well. These trees are overlapping. As soon as that comes around there, I've got to work quite fast here because it's very dry. Let's just pull that in there. Bit of dry brush to drag that away. Heading off up the bridge. And we've got a tree that's split there, tree there. You get the idea. It's just to suggest there are trees going off here. I could spend hours. I love doing negative trees, or even negative trees, but I'm not going to spend too long on them today. Again, it's a little bit hard there, so a little spray. Drag these lines up to suggest that these negative trees carry on, knowing full well that it's just an illusion. Okay, just a bit of a dancey line here. Oops, big splodge there. Never mind. Picked him up twice with a towel on this. There we go. So just make this some scrubby bits here. I'm going back to my bluier mix with plenty of water in it, and now all I'm going to do is just suggest there are trees in the background going up into the distance. Still a little bit strong, that. Okay. And they're all crossing over in the background, going off up there. Who knows where they're going? Let's have a couple over here. So I'm just suggesting, giving the impression of trees. A bit harsh on the bottom, dab off here and there. There we go. I think trees are done. So if you want to suggest that those negative trees go up a little bit further, you could use any stiff nylon brush. I like using an angle shader. Squeeze the water out of it and then just follow your tree up through the paint. And you might have to do this a couple of times in order to get the tree to pop out negatively. The background here is not very dark, so it's not going to be really obvious what I'm doing. But to give the idea, instead of painting in everything, you can lift it off. I do have a video on lift out, how to lift everything off rather than putting it on, which can give you some nice ghost trees, that sort of effect. I'm not going to do too much of that because we've got quite a lot on here already, but just to show you can follow up those trees and lift out. So I've got a little bit more of a ghost tree there, looks a bit more natural. I've just filled in a little bit of foliage under the arches here, and a little bit along the top of the bridge there. So I'm going to now approach the bridge. So I'm going to use my raw umber again on the bridge. I don't think I'm going to add any more colour in. Let's keep this painting simple. I will need my little bit of practice paper here. So I'm going to do the dry brush again, but I just need to make sure I've got the right consistency of, sorry, not raw umber, burnt umber. So there we go, that's quite nice. So suggesting that the bridge has got some texture on it. That was just a little bit bright depth colour wise, so that's better. Just literally calmed it down a little bit. So the bridge itself has got lots of textures, and there is a line along the top of it, so I'm just going to get the hang of moving my brush and then just go for it. Get a feel for the bridge. We're rolling over that bridge. Can't think about this too much, otherwise you'd never do it. There we go. That's probably it. Yep, I'll do that. Using my rigger again. Going to pick up some of that burnt umber, and there is a little edge under here which is the capping stones. Now this bit's still dampish, so some of it's running back, which is good because it will break the line up. I don't want it to be solid all the way along. The top of the bridge does undulate a little bit. That's what my geography teacher told me all those years ago. It's not flat in Norfolk, it undulates, Jackie. So thank you, Mr. Griffiths, I'll never forget that. And for those of you who haven't visited Norfolk, you may well think it's flat, but when you come up and have a look, which hopefully one day you will, you'll realise that there are quite a few areas that are far from flat. Sorry, undulating. Just a very fine line through there, that's it. I could do more with that and then of course I'd ruin it, so I'm going to stop there. I'm just going to pop my line down here. Over here I've got some little signs and things, so while I've got that on there, I'm just going to give them a little bit more form, just with some lines, very rough. There we go. And I could also use the same lines to just go across these trees as if there's a tree in front of them. Sometimes helps to push things back, and if you're not happy with something, just push it into the background by putting something else in front of it, and that sort of made that bluey area link back in over here now. So I've got some ivy growing over the edge of the bridge here, and I don't normally worry about where things are on the picture, but sometimes it's good just to go back and see what's on there, what you'd like to include. So the posts and everything are not to scale, they're not in the right place, and that is definitely not dry brush. There we go, that's better. A little bit of dry brush to suggest something growing over here. That's better, isn't it? And because I like that effect, I might have it over here as well, just to suggest that. There we go. Haven't done anything with this foreground here, so maybe that's what we should do next. But before I do that, I like that effect. I'm going to put some more over here. There we go, that looks better over there now, doesn't it? Oh yes. So we're coming forward in the picture, so the burnt umber and some of that raw sienna we started with could potentially come into this area. Now this area is not the photo at all because this area is water, but I just thought it looked nice with a little bit of foliage and stuff going on here. Maybe just overhanging the water. I'm going to go too much with that. Pick up some of those warm colours where you can see a gap in the foliage, just pull some lines across it. So it just looks like there's something growing here. It doesn't matter, we don't know what it is. It's just a tangled, weedy mess next to a river. So that's because that's got a bit of warm colour in, that's also pulled that forward. This over here, I don't know if you noticed, is slightly strong. It's annoying me because it's too strong. It's in the background because it's got a hard edge, it catches your eye. So I'm just going to work into that a little bit with my little stiff angle brush, just to break up some of those lines. Not much, just a little bit. You don't want a wet brush, just a damp brush that's clean. And then trusty towel, just personal preference. That was slightly hard edged for me. It didn't mind it near the trees because they're canopy, but over here it was a bit not quite right. So going back to my bridge, the bottom of the bridge has got dark area, and also along under each of the pillars is dark. So this is when you start getting, ooh, am I going to ruin my picture? So we could dampen the page with some blue and then drop that in as it's drying, I think, so we get a soft edge. The actual bridge itself could have some more colour on, so we can do that because that is going up away from the water, and it's that oops, missed. So just a bit on this one. Always good to follow the directions that things would be in. So I've sort of put some softer darks there to start us off. We need this bridge to be sitting somewhere, not just hovering in midair. Okay. Back to the big brush toe. Well, let's get an even bigger brush. There we go. I use a Jackson's Raven brushes. Very, very nice brushes. But as you can see, there's a lot of brush there, so I'm going to need a lot of paint. All I'm going to do to start with is just pull a wash across here of blue. That's obviously, if I use a brush like this, it's going to cover that whole area quite solidly. So let me just mix it up, and then I'll show you how you can get a point out of something that big. So a brush like this, as opposed to a brush like this. This is a round, and this is a mop. Can you see how much thicker the belly is? The bit in the middle that's holding the paint it's got a big belly, and this one has got a belly, but it's not quite as big. This is a lovely mop, which are really, really lovely brushes. So I'm going to sweep it across the whole base, very thin layer of paint across the whole base of my bridge. And that's also going to take out that bit of yellow here, which wasn't really working because it was where the water was. So I'm not going to go over all of it, but I am going to use this brush because I've got it. Let's just cover some more areas with the big brush. Look how much quicker I can paint over this because it's a big area. There we go. So that's my mop has done its job. I could pick up more paint. Well, let's try and see if I can do it. So I've got a point here. I'm trying to loosen up. I'm going to pick up some thicker dark paint. Now I've got darks under this bridge, so let's see if I can. Oh, it's already dried. Look at that. How quick does that dry? Quick cheat. No such thing as cheating, certainly not when I'm painting. So let's just pop that in again. A little bit of darks just where the bridge is. We also know we've got some foam water here, so it's no bad idea to put some darks around it. And then just under here and off that way. This is quite a dark area here, so let's just drop some of that in as well. Get rid of that dark on my brush, but this area is too hard, so spread away. There we go, that's not so hard now, is it? Don't argue with me, I've got a huge mop brush. So these areas here that have dried, not quite working with those lines. So I'm just going to smooth them away, like so. There we go. And this has made a nice dark edge. I'm going to let that dry. So I've just filled in a little bit of the blue in the background there that I'd missed. And I'm now just running my rigger brush around with some nice lines that is just my style, to just suggest these arches a little bit more solid, and that's just my style. As I say, if you don't like using a rigger, you just absolutely don't have to. Everybody has their own style. Just lift off some if they're a bit heavy. Okay, we've got this one here. This is interesting, so I can't work out if that's water there. Oh, yes, it's supposed to be where you can see through, so again it's a little bit too pale there, so I'll let that dry and I'll go back to that and just put a little bit more dark blue in there. That one didn't work, slightly skew riff, and we just pull this round here and that'll do. So this is now relatively dry, so I'm now going to go along the bottom of my bridge and put in some slightly thicker dark marks that are running along the water here. They're just bits of the bridge, it's just where the shadow is, the darkest part of the river. Just give it a little bit more definition here. This is still sepia. Limited palette, or however you want to describe it, using few colours helps your paintings knit together. They work better because you're not adding loads and loads of colours in. Not saying you can't. If you want colours in your pictures, you go ahead and have them. I like to sometimes keep my colours quite limited, as I've done here. I think the cool colours are working fairly well, and oops, dropped him. I do think that's a nice combination of blues, but we've yet to do this bit. Can you tell I'm procrastinating? I'm putting off the inevitable. So if you've been doing the same, you're not alone. I'm just popping some random bits over here. As I said before, if something's not quite working, then disguise it. Make it part of the background. your picture, your rules. Okay, liking this here. That edge there is a bit hard, so you can pop in there. Got to try and go a bit faster, Jackie, because your battery's about to run out. And you keep promising your lovely viewers that you're going to shorten your videos, and you never quite manage it. Okay, so I'm going to try a slightly different technique now with this angle shader, and just drag in some thicker blue just across. It's a little bit too strong, I think, and I need to get rid of that. Let's get rid of that light there, because that's better. There we go. It's looking a bit better now. So I did earlier with the lift out with the trees, you can lift out with the just bring my water closer so I don't throw it all over my picture. So I'm just squeezing my brush out. It's not been dried on a towel. I'm just lifting out some marks here and there. I'm getting some blooms here because I've put some wet on and it's spread, but it's fine. Trying to blend the water in the foreground with the water in the background, because it wasn't quite working. There's also some shadows underneath here, but I don't want to over egg this because it's ever so easy to do too much, and I'm in danger of doing too much. So just let that settle there. Let's put some line there. Okay, so coming forward, I'm going to use this technique to add some lines, trying to keep them smaller. This is, any flat brush will do this technique. It's more of a straight line technique than a curvy line one, but don't go too, you don't want these to be big because they're in the distance. We want these to be getting bigger. Just roll with it, just get into a rhythm, just using your brush. Make sure some of them go over these areas that we've masked out, so we've yet to see what happens when we take that off. Could still go all horribly wrong. There we go. It's got some blooms going on here, but I like those. They're adding texture, all sorts of things going on. So they're my straight lines, smaller at the back and bigger as you come forward. Some of them overlap. Make sure you go over some of the masked areas. So then switch to the good old rigger, which is our weapon of choice for wiggly lines. Technical term, wiggly lines. Pop in some more indigo. Just make sure I've got enough water. It's amazing even how many times I don't add enough water, and it's watercolour, isn't it? So rigger brush, you could hold it like a pen, or you could hold it like a hammer grip like that. I find that really hard, and all you're trying to do is introduce some lines that go back on themselves, so it's like an S shape. This isn't a calm river, so there's only so much of this that's going to look right, because the water is fast flowing and we don't want to overdo these lines, because that's sort of suggesting a calm, not moving river. But I just love these lines, so I'm putting them in. Make sure you follow the direction of where the water's flowing. So it just helps you get these curved lines in, which we didn't really have before. We could have done this on damp paper, but just wanted to see what it looked like. We didn't do any dry brushing on the water. Of course, that's another way of adding sparkle, but if you want to be a realistic painter, you want to paint all those ripples, you go right ahead, but I won't be doing that. That's not for me. And if you think that some of those look a bit harsh, again, just dab over randomly, turning your towel as you go. Lift off. A little bit of wet there. There we go. So I think we need to get that dry. take off the masking fluid and see what sort of picture we've got. This is now totally dry. I've left it a nice long time, gone off and had a chat to somebody and come back. So the first thing I'm going to do using my fingers is to find the masking fluid. She's hiding across here in various places. I can't remember where I put it now. So we know there's some down here. Well, that's quite nice. Very subtle. Bit of splashing going on there. And this is going to be the interesting one. So if your fingers start to hurt, use a mask away, which does the job beautifully. There's our water coming through. A few sparkles on this side. This was just like the light, wasn't it? You can't tell if it's gone. Just run your fingers along. As your masking block, you can't feel it as well. Use your fingers to see, excuse me, see if there's any left. Quite often there is, and it's hidden. There we go. That's come off the paper really well. Sometimes masking fluid can tear paper. You can buy a paper where the sizing, which is the protective coating that helps the paint to stick, the sizing is a lot harder and tougher, hard sized paper. And if you do a lot of masking fluid, you might wish to invest in that. So there we go, I've got that all off now. So the first thing I can tell is that this reflection here doesn't really work for me. At this point you are editing your painting, completely and utterly up to you what you keep, what you don't keep. So if you don't like something, just gently soften it away. Could do some dry brushing now. Let's try that. So let's pick up some of that old paint that we had. Get our practice sheet. There we go. Dry brush across, particularly good in the foreground of the water, just adding a little bit more texture. The paper is picking up the brush because the paper is quite textured, so you get some nice effects. Again, we've got a lot of effects here, so we don't want to overdo any of these. But it's nice to have a play. This light, this sort of water here, the sparkles, which are this area here, that's working quite well. So you might just want to do a little dry brush across that just to emphasize without losing those. Take some of those off a little bit. So I've got rid of that very light area there, but you can still see a lighter area. So this bit is now where all the froth and all the movement is. So how am I going to enhance that? So you could use a fluffy brush and stipple with some colour, and that's while I'm talking about that, let me just show you how that would work. If you're doing the trees, you want a bit more detail in your trees, could stipple with an old brush, if you can see that. So just stippling on, don't overdo it. You don't need to buy a special foliage brush, just use an old brush that's been already stippled because you've used it a lot. Add a little bit more ivy on here in places. So the paint I'm using now is quite a lot thicker. Be careful not to overdo this. A little bit dark there, let's take that off. You soon can tell if it doesn't look right. Just keep looking at the overall feel of the picture. So that was way too dark and way too blue. So I'm now picking up some, all of these colours were already on my palette. I'm not adding anything else. but I'm just adding some extra depth with some thicker paint. If I add new colours now, it's just gonna not work. That's just a bit darker, stronger, because it's in the foreground. If you don't like it, lift it off. There you go. Just be really loose with your marks. You'll find it's quite freeing to do that. And you might surprise yourself with what you can create just by being loose. So the stippling worked for the foliage, but I'm not sure I'm going to use it on the water. So I'm just going to have a play, I think. Pick up some of the indigo, and we've got flotsam and jetsam and all sorts of things flying through here. So I'm just going to use circular marks just to suggest some movement. It's all about suggesting things. This may or may not work, I don't even know. Okay, like so, don't overdo it. Probably nearly there. A couple of stronger lines over here. And now I'm going to show you how to cheat. I love cheating. This is gouache or gouache. It's a white, and there you go. It is an opaque white, so you can add it on top of your watercolours. Now I use a little dish like this, and you don't want to be adding very much water to this because it needs to be creamy. So you can use it straight out of the tube, or you can just add a little spray to it to loosen it up a little bit, especially if it's been, just add a little drop of water. There we go. So I'm using my rigger. It's not like masking fluid, it won't ruin your brush, but you do make sure you clean it out afterwards. I just want enough liquid for it to move like ink. And then I can use that along places that I think I would need a little bit of sparkle, and you don't want to overdo this. Where you think you might have a little sparkle coming through, maybe the bridge there, just coming around that edge there. Then you can do some of the lines we did earlier, but this time you're doing little wiggly white lines. So if somebody tells you that this is cheating because you shouldn't use gouache, whatever you want to call it, gouache, if you're not supposed to use it because it's not pure watercolour, well, guess what? Turner used it. I went to a Turner exhibition in our city in Norwich, and there were some beautiful watercolours, and quite a few of the masters were using body colour, also known as gouache. And so next time somebody tells you you shouldn't do it, it's cheating, tell them, well, Turner did it, so can I. There you go. A little bonus bit of information for you. So this is just literally a little sparkle here and there. You can just dot and dash the brush around. You can add loads of these. If you've got a mind to, you can go mad. But just do what you think you need. Do you need a lot? Do you need a little? That's your decision. I could even add some of it to some of the paint, and you get a slightly more opaque colour for, say, doing the sign here. Again, once you get opaque colour going on, it starts to really stand out. So just be wary of that. Don't put it in places you don't want things to stand out. So a few dots around here, just because the water's moving. So you get the idea. If you haven't got any gouache, you might have white paint in your watercolour set. Give it a go, but you'll find that the white paint in watercolours usually is Chinese white. It's not very opaque. So you could either buy gouache or you could buy acrylic ink, white acrylic ink, which is great. And for those of you who know what a posca pen is, which is acrylic paint inside a pen essentially, that's also really good for this sort of embellishment. So I could go on for a lot longer on this, but I'm going to stop there. I've achieved what I wanted to, which was to capture the movement of water coming through this lovely bridge in Ling in Norfolk. And I've used a very simple palette of cools. The blues are cool, the raw sienna is a very gentle warm, and it gives a nice feeling of the last days of winter just before all the spring bulbs start to pop their heads out. So hopefully you enjoyed that and you'll give it a go. I hope you enjoyed painting that sketch. It's a nice exercise to play around with some masking fluid and to see how it works and what you can do to give the impression of moving water. We started off with a black and white photograph, and then just take it your own way. I'll pop in the description the colours I used, but you could just use whatever colours you like really. I've done a sort of a late winter with the sun out type of colours, but you could do spring, autumn, summer. Have a think about the colours that you'd like to use. Got some movement in the water here. It's not perfect, but it's a sketch and it's quick and easy. Have a go, see how you get on. So see you soon on the next video. Bye for now, take care and happy painting. See you later.